As Nicolas Hill sorted through his usual pile of letters, he came across a heartfelt request that would lead him on an unexpected journey of self-discovery and compassion. Little did he know, this simple act of kindness would change not only a young boy's life, but his own as well. It was a typical morning for Nicolas Hill, 64, a magnate who had amassed his fortune by reselling car parts and later establishing his own production holding for spare parts. As an old-school enthusiast, he enjoyed going through his paper letters first. Despite receiving most of his mail electronically, his secretary would read the letters aloud for him. While checking the mail, a handwritten letter caught Nicholas's attention. It was from a boy named Julius, who was 8 years old and lived in a neighboring state. Julius asked if Nicholas would be available next week to play the role of his dad at the school's Parents' Day. The boy explained that he had found Nicholas's address on the back of one of his late mother's photographs. Nicholas initially told his secretary that he would not be available for such charity events and had no interest in visiting a small town in another state. However, his secretary informed him that the letter mentioned the recent passing of Julius's mother, and he had no relatives to turn to. Nicholas felt a sense of unease, as he had mourned his own wife for nearly 20 years, and understood the pain of loss. He ultimately decided to attend the school event and instructed his secretary to write a response letter to the boy. On the day of Parents' Day, Nicholas gathered his assistants and drove about 3 hours to reach the small town. Established in the 1920s, the town featured old buildings and modest neighborhoods. However, the school itself was neat and clean, with welcoming teachers. Nicholas arrived in a convoy of 3 luxury company cars, which undoubtedly caught everyone's attention. As they stepped out of the vehicles, Nicholas and his assistants were unsure of where to go or what to do. Just then, Julius came running out, exclaiming, "My dad is here!" He eagerly took Nicholas's hand and led him into the classroom. Nicholas spent his time sitting beside Julius, watching the boy happily participate in his lesson. Each child had a parent sitting next to them, with some students actively answering the teacher's questions. After the lesson, Julius thanked Nicholas and hugged him. Miss Myers, his teacher, approached Nicholas and asked to speak with him privately, sending Julius off to play. She informed Nicholas that social services were finalizing their paperwork, and soon they would remove Julius from the school to place him in foster care. Julius had been living with his mother, Liliana, who had recently passed away. Despite the tragedy, Julius remained resilient and strong, with neighbors providing support by visiting his home from time to time. Julius and his mother had led a humble life together. They lived in a small, rundown house, making do with what they had. Liliana worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, but she always found time to share a warm meal and a bedtime story with Julius. They didn't have much, but the love and bond they shared filled their home with happiness. Nicholas assured Miss Myers that he would assist with any questions or concerns that might arise, and he also offered to help the school if they needed anything. After chatting for a bit, Miss Myers cautiously asked Nicholas if he had any real connection to Julius, because she and her colleagues had noticed a striking resemblance between them. Their facial features and manner of speaking were nearly identical. Nicholas responded with a laugh. "It's just a coincidence," he said. "This is my first time visiting your beautiful town, and I've never heard of Liliana before." Soon after, Julius came running up to Nicholas and asked if he could give him a ride home. They all got into the cars and drove to Julius's house. Nicholas's car stopped in front of the house, and he said his goodbyes to Julius. "I have some things I need to take care of, so I have to go," he told the boy. "But you can call or write to me whenever you want." Julius replied that he didn't have a phone but could write to him. Nicholas then remembered the photo and asked if he could come inside for a moment. Upon entering, Nicholas was shocked by the condition of the old house. The wallpaper was peeling, the floorboards creaked, and there was a musty smell in the air. Julius retrieved his mother's photographs and began showing them to Nicholas. The boy flipped through them quickly, not looking at Nicholas's face. Nicholas, however, was moved to tears, and he suddenly clutched his heart. He sat down on a creaky chair as Julius ran outside, shouting for help. Nicholas's assistant retrieved a medical kit from the car trunk and rushed inside. After administering some injections, Nicholas regained his composure. He picked up one of the photos, tears streaming down his face, and said softly, "I took this photo. She looks happy here." Julius looked at him, trying to find the right words to say. Eventually he asked, "Did you know my mom?" Nicholas chuckled, smiled, and replied, "Yes, because she is my daughter. She left us after your grandmother passed away." Nicholas began to share the story of his daughter Giselle, who apparently later became known as Liliana. After his wife's passing, Giselle fell into a deep depression and blamed Nicolas for her mother's death. She accused him of not using his wealth, connections, or influence to save her mother. Nicolas tried to explain that he had done everything within his power, but ultimately it was out of his hands and a part of a greater plan. Despite his attempts to reason with her, their relationship deteriorated, and one day, Giselle left the house without a word. She disappeared, leaving Nicolas heartbroken and at a loss for how to find her. Over the years, he tried to track her down, hiring private investigators and following every lead he could find. However, Giselle, now Liliana, had managed to erase her past and start anew. Nicolas never knew that he had a grandson named Julius until their paths crossed through the heartfelt letter. Nicolas wiped his tears and asked Julius, "Why did you want me to come to Parents' Day? Did you know I was your grandpa?" Julius shook his head and replied, "No, I didn't know. I was hoping someone would answer my letter. You see, I don't have a dad, and I've always wondered what it would be like to have one. My mom loved me a lot, but she never talked about my dad. When I asked her, she just got sad and talked about something else." Julius continued, "The kids at school were mean to me because I didn't have a dad. They said stuff like, 'Julius doesn't have a dad,' or 'Nobody wants to be Julius's dad.' It made me really sad, and I felt lonely. Parents' Day made me think about not having a dad even more, and I didn't want to be there all by myself. So I wrote you that letter, never thinking I'd actually meet my grandpa." Nicolas hugged Julius tightly and continued crying. He said, "Attaboy. It's okay, son. I'll be here for you from now on." Nicolas instructed his assistant to contact social services and halt the procedure. He also asked them to inform the teachers that, if possible, he would be taking Julius with him and that Julius would live with him from now on. The assistants began making phone calls and gathering the necessary information. Together, Nicolas and Julius collected all of Julius's belongings, loaded them into the car, and left to Nicolas's house. The next morning, Nicolas woke up with a sense of accomplishment and joy. He was happy to see Julius at the breakfast table, but his assistant brought him some troubling news. The assistant explained that social services had already stopped the procedure a week ago because a man had come forward claiming to be Julius's father. The man had provided the necessary documents, and social services had halted the process accordingly. However, Julius's supposed biological father had told them he would take Julius home, but he never actually showed up at Julius's place. This revelation left Nicolas and Julius with a mix of confusion and concern about the situation, and the mysterious man who claimed to be Julius's father. Nicolas decided to speak with Julius about his father, but Julius said he had never seen him. Feeling a sense of responsibility, Nicolas chose to visit the town once more to confront the man claiming to be Julius's father. He took his assistants and a lawyer with him. Meanwhile, the assistant who had remained in the town had already located the man, who called himself El Capitan, and arranged for him to meet with Nicolas to discuss the situation regarding Julius. El Capitan requested to meet in Hosford City, which was larger than the small town where Julius had been living. They agreed to meet in a hotel conference room to have their conversation. El Capitan spoke with a strange accent as he discussed Liliana.
"I loved her with all of my heart," he said, "and I was ready to do anything for her. But Liliana, or Gisele as you know her, left me too. I never saw the boy, Julius."
Nicolas confronted El Capitan, demanding that he let Julius live with him instead. He was angry at El Capitan for leaving his daughter to die in poverty. El Capitan responded that he had all the necessary paperwork for both himself and Liliana, and that he was the one who had created their new IDs. He refused to let Julius go, claiming the boy could help him with his business in the city. Nicolas, who lacked any documentation to prove his connection to Julius, asked El Capitan about his profession. El Capitan laughed and replied,
"I deal with girls and drugs, my friend."
Nicolas quietly asked his lawyer if El Capitan was correct in his claims. The lawyer somberly confirmed that El Capitan indeed was right, and as the boy's official father, he might be able to take Julius away. Nicolas, growing increasingly angry, declared that he didn't want to see Julius working for El Capitan. In his response, El Capitan raised his voice, threatening to call the police and report that they had taken Julius without his consent. The lawyer intervened, attempting to calm both sides. He asked El Capitan if he would consider accepting money in exchange for Julius. El Capitan smiled and replied,
"Now, that's the best idea I've heard all day.
Nicolas asked how much he wanted for the boy, and El Capitan responded with an initial demand of $5 million. Nicolas said nothing, glancing at his lawyer. The lawyer stood up and tried to reason with El Capitan, hoping to lower the price. However, El Capitan only increased his demand, now asking for $7 million up front and $20,000 every month. Nicolas was furious, and El Capitan laughed at his reaction. He taunted,
"Do you know how many old and rich people I rip off every day?"
With that, Nicolas stormed out of the room, leaving the lawyer to try and calm El Capitan down. After a while, the lawyer had approached Nicolas, who had left the room, and informed him that El Capitan was now demanding $12 million. Nicolas instructed his lawyer to transfer the money. The lawyer then mentioned that El Capitan wanted the payment in cash. However, the lawyer also told Nicolas that he had come up with a better idea. The next day, Nicolas and his lawyer withdrew the money in cash from the bank and headed back to the city. They entered a building filled with escort women, making their way through a garage where El Capitan awaited them. Clearly pleased, El Capitan accepted the money from Nicolas and the lawyer, providing them with a handwritten letter stating that he was relinquishing his parental rights to Julius. After Nicolas and his lawyers left the premises, El Capitan began counting the money. However, it wasn't long before the police surrounded the building and arrested him. As it turned out, the lawyer had contacted some friends and recorded all their conversations with El Capitan from the beginning. Later, they presented all the evidence to a judge, proving that El Capitan had no real interest in Julius as a father and was not fit to raise him. The judge made his decision, and Julius was now legally placed under Nicolas's care. With the legal battle won, Nicolas could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that Julius would be safe and well cared for with him. In the end, Nicolas's love for his newfound grandson Julius triumphed over the greed and deception of El Capitan. Through determination and the help of his trusted lawyer, Nicolas was able to rescue Julius from a potentially dangerous and harmful situation, offering him a loving home and a brighter future. In a world filled with challenges and uncertainties, the unwavering love and dedication of family can often be the beacon of hope that guides us through difficult times. So, cherish the bonds you share with your loved ones, and never hesitate to fight for their happiness and safety, for it is through these connections that we find the true meaning of life.